Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Stories from Designers and Architects doing facilitation. We always try to get the name wrong. I was just thinking about this one. But today we have Marco Heimeshoff with us, who's going to tell us a story about his experience from the past. So, Marco, thank you for coming.
Thank you, Kenny. So I wanted to give you a story from the very bottom of my heart, like a company that I was accompanying for many years. And after we did like a long transformation from a technical perspective, going from very imperative programming, very uncoordinated, to different architecture styles, object-oriented programming, even introducing some functional programming for the domain and so on, introducing agile feedback loops and whatnot. So it was a cultural overhaul of the whole company over a longer period of time, realizing at some point that what was missing is the collaborative modeling part. So no matter what we optimized, it still failed and kept on failing. For me, like in the middle of the whole transformation, I realized that all these failings, even though they look different in their signals, they all felt like the same thing. It's always we get wrong what the customer actually needed. And it failed in different ways because of different, all the things we optimized before, but we never really delivered what they needed. And then we started doing domain-driven design at some point. And that's when the collaborative modeling kicked in. So we're like, okay, we need to get better at this, and we need to introduce like ways to get people to talk to each other. And it seemed to work for quite a long while. So we started with simple things like just a impromptu modeling session, just talking about the ubiquitous language, figuring out which bounded context exists. So starting from the architecture that's already there, which is always an easy start, right? We had the mandate from the developers. So the programmers were all in and said, let's do the thing. So we looked at the architecture and the modules that existed in the code and extracted a context map from there, and then introduced that to the product people and said, look, this is the structure we see. Sorry, is that how you see the business as well? And then they were like, yes, this looks good, but we need one more here. And you realize like, no, they're thinking in software modules still. Like they're trying to tell us the solution, like we need a new thing that they can click over there. It's like, okay, this transformation took quite a while. And even though, and this is all the still fun part, but the hard part came when we were at a level where we realized, oh, we're having the buy-in from everyone now. Like product was all in. The boss of the company was like super happy about us doing collaborative modeling. We did event-storming sessions, and the first few were like a bit awkward because everybody knew each other, right? There was already some cultural being used to things, and there were certain relationships that were already baked in deep into the company that wouldn't change anymore, most likely. So there were people hating each other people being like comrades, and you can feel this in the event storming. But the event storming made these things not safe to break because, again, culture was deeply ingrained, but it made things very transparent, and you could feel where it's off, where people don't really go deep into details. And we used the signal to then go, hey, okay, let's talk to these people in private. Let's figure out what happened here. And more, we introduced like open feedback loops and tried to make it more psychologically safe and say, look, let's have a conversation about this and feedback things. And how did you feel in this session, right? And what went good, what went wrong? Do you think these models are all equally valid in their quality and so on? And that's when we realized the very first problem with cultural alignment. So all the technology and all the methods we used, they helped in areas and they made the models better, but some core problem never got away, and this feeling was icky. And during a feedback session, I realized if you have a green mindset, if you're an egalitarian and you think like, hey, self-improvement is great and collective and collaborative improvement is great, like this is what we're here for, right? We strive to become better as a group, to better ourselves and humanity, if you want to go the Star Trek route. Like this is amazing. But if you have a conservative mindset, which is not necessarily negative, it often sounds that way from green thinking people, but if you have a conservative mindset, things are good the way they are. Like we are a family here. Right? If you hear these words like, oh yeah, no, we're a family in our company. Like, yeah, we all stick to each other. This is great. Then conserving what is, keeping the culture that exists alive is great. And feedback becomes violence. So sitting in a workshop saying, hey, what can we improve next week? It's just a positive thing for me. And I realized I was actively hurting people, but they, of course, don't say, hey, when you give me feedback, this hurts me because I have a conservative mindset and I feel attacked in my values. That's not what you will hear. You will hear jokes. You will hear dismissive things. You will hear like they will ponder off. If you really pinpoint it too hard, they start attacking you, blaming, and then the whole shebang of how people interact when they are feeling threatened and put in a corner. So realizing this at some point, that I wondered why feedback loops don't really work. Like the agile feedback loops kind of work, but only on the technical side, not really fixing the culture. The modeling sessions exposed things. And once we started, hey, great, now we see our controversies, which is a good thing, right? This is the usual. If you stand in a room, you talk to people, we're opposing each other. I'm right, you're right, we're fighting. Bad. But once you stand shoulder to shoulder against a model, like this is the whole premise of event storming, we're like, let's attack this model together. This is wonderful. And we see different perspectives, and we can figure out in which context are you right and in which context am I right. This is wonderful. Yeah, this is wonderful if you want to improve the systemic problem, if you want to get out of a systemic rut. But for the people that want to keep the system as it is alive because it gives them safety, a place of belonging, or I'm just other reasons why they want to keep it that way, you attack them. And you don't only attack their way of working, you go ahead and attack their identity without even knowing it. So involuntarily, I was actually a person that just went through with an axe through a culture and really hurt those people. And I don't think they even realized that they were hurt by me. It just felt like, oh, Marco is an idiot. Why is he always doing this? Like tree hugging people, blah, 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 talking about feelings. We want to build software here, right? So all of these things don't become transparent. You just feel it kind of in the room and something is off, and you can't even address it because it just leads to more violence. And by violence, I just mean soft violence, but still violence. So that was a really big learning and a really big problem. And then we started gathering more people in the company that I knew are open to feedback, and then those who understand the psychosocial dynamics of groups of people, trying to figure out, okay, how can we now make this work? And we actually use bounded context mapping for that. So context mapping to say, look, in this bounded context, we're assuming the people in this context are more conservative. It's a dangerous assumption because we're just reducing a group of complex individuals to a property, but let's work with that assumption and protect ourselves using a context boundary, right? So that was, it seemed, the solution, building a proper context map that doesn't just contain code and team topologies in the classical sense, but also in the emotional psychosocial sense, saying, okay, what kind of mentality and culture do we feel here, and how would that impact our interaction? And with that, we could actually start to manage. Problem with management all of a sudden is it feels like manipulation for the people that get managed, right? So the moment somebody catches on that, oh, you put us in a group because we're all alike, they're not reflecting on because we are the conservative part and you are the egalitarian part, and therefore we need a boundary. They think, oh, you're putting us in a corner and micromanaging us. And this, we never got out of this rut, this constantly deepening loop of people being hurt by cultural mismatch. And this was, we reached out for help, I mean, you know me, right? I went to every conference over the last decade, the 2010s. And every person that was agile, system thinking, socio-technical, invite them to the company, let them help. And yeah, this problem, the more you try to help, the more it's just like people just get stonewalled and stuck. And so just letting go at some point was the only thing that was possible to say, okay, let's loosen the nudge. Let's not try to fix things. Let's work with an unfit system that just doesn't properly work ever. So that was a multi-year effort that really, really hurt. Letting loose was the only thing, letting go of this problem, and then inviting lots of people to help with the struggle didn't solve the problem. So really just accepting it, working with an unfit system was the best that this situation actually, that we could do in this situation. So that was a multi-year thing, and it was very painful because I was constantly exhausting myself, trying to fix it, right? You're like, what else can I try? I tried event storming, of course, and then context mapping, and we tried domain storytelling because people were like, oh, these sticky notes are too vague, right? The feedback you get is not the actual thing that happens in them, but it's what they think is wrong. Like, oh yeah, no, this is too vague. Okay, let's go more diagram style. Let's use domain storytelling. Okay, then you have, at some point, the developers are in the clear. They're like, yes, we like this. This is like UML. We can build this, cool. And you're not talking about feelings anymore. Great. But then you have the strategy part of the company, like the other side of the mandate. Yeah, they're like, but this is just technology now, right? This is a programmer's problem. No. And then we went into the second phase of we can't solve this company's problem. Getting the leadership involved into the entire solution making, how can we get out of this rut? Leadership was and I'm assuming now, but felt like a very conservative person that doesn't want to seem conservative. Like they wanted to be like a dynamic leader in technology. Like, yes, we are modern, advanced and whatnot. But you could feel in everything they did, like they were like super conservative. They were living their own politics their external politics inside of the company. And this was like, it was introducing a kind of toxic culture, in my opinion. This is, of course, opinionated, but yeah, so that person always said, yes, you can do that. You can do whatever you like here, right? We give you all the power, like introduce new methods, do the domain modeling, collaborative. That's great. Like we want to be part of it. And they sat in every session. And in every session we did, they sat in the background and observed. And I was like, this is Eventstorming. And you are the person that's leading this company into the next millennium. Like, great. Here are sticky notes. Would you like to tell us what you think is the most important part? Like, no, no, no. You go ahead. I'm going to tell you if something is missing or wrong. And you're like, but this was going badly. So because I knew it was a multi-year operation, it's not something that needs to be fixed in like a day or two. You can let it go for a while, right? You can, okay, this person doesn't feel safe in this meeting. So let them show how the method worked. Let them show how we find conflict, and we don't blame people. We just figure out conflict is great. We learn from it. We build a better model. So all of the good things, again, going through the methods, using all the things that to improve the model. And the boss person, they played the game at some point. Like they never really fully committed to it, but they played it. They were like, yes, let's add sticky notes. But you could see the smirk. And it's a smirk that, as you can probably tell, it still gives me an emotional reaction of, I want to punch that face while I'm in the session. So you feel like I've been here for many years, really trying to help your company. And you're sitting here like, yeah, sure, sticky notes, programmers, ha, ha, ha. Like, and everybody could feel that the boss isn't taking it seriously. And then I realized all the methods in the world, all the prowess, all the expertise. Like I was already a consultant helping companies around the world with all of that symbolic power. You have no chance if your boss says, oh, yeah, sure, this is cute, let's do this. But they don't say that. If they actually say it, you can work with that. But if they don't say it, but you just feel it, it's like, oh, that made me so mad. And yeah, we really tried open discussion, but because he's a conservative, he felt attacked in his identity, right? So then it's like, okay, let's try soft manipulation. Let's try nudging the right things. Let's invite him only for a few hours to get the information we need to make it about money, talk about strategic futures. We introduced Worldly mapping to say, look, this is how the market evolves and this is how we evolve, right? So we went overboard with everything you can introduce. And then at some point realizing that whatever we were doing was just a very expensive experiment. And our boss was talking to another programmer. And this is the kicker, after many years of working in this, talked to another programmer to actually build the things that make the company money right now, and told him to not interact with us. Because he didn't want this to be dragged into the agile modeling cycle, right? This like blah, 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 the tree hugging developers, like, yeah, it's cute what they're doing, it's great what they're doing, like company culture and whatnot. But please, we need this working well and fast, and build it. And the other programmer was just like building something quick that worked quickly and it made money quickly. And we realized after we learned about this, it took many months to get there, but after we learned about this, we realized the new thing they built are actually at the core of what the company is making money with right now. Super important. And the software was janky, of course, because one person under pressure, under speed did it. And we were like, what this needs to be modeled properly. We need properly language and context boundaries, and there has to be responsibility and at least a second pair of eyes on it, and pair programming. Oh God. But this was the culture clash. So at some point, actually giving up was the only thing I could do, and say, I tried for many years. I think I helped a lot of people in that company to see how you can do things differently. And we improved the quality locally of certain parts of the system. But as you know, for systems, if you don't figure out where the bottleneck in the entire system is, and you actually repair the system at hand, optimizing a local part that's not in the key value chain doesn't have any. So it felt we like really heated up the universe for a while. We made a lot of money left and right and whatnot. But in the end, this was a big non-success. It was a learning for me and some others, but not the success we wanted to have. So yeah, this is one of the graveyard stories that I push under the rug usually, but I wanted to share that. So yeah, that's my story so far. I'm still suffering from it, but I'm smiling. So go ahead, ask your question.
The first question I have is, how did you know that the problem was cultural alignment? Because you started off the story saying this is a story about cultural alignment. That means that you spent quite a few cycles thinking about it.
Yes. So this was not my initial analysis, right? I didn't start it saying, ooh, there seems to be cultural misalignment here, because first of all, how dare I, right? Who would I be to understand this quickly? And if you understand this quickly, then, well, check your understanding, because this is probably biased. So being aware of all of that, initially I thought this is a technological problem, so let's fix it with better architecture. Then I thought it's a feedback loop problem, so let's fix it with feedback loops. Then I figured, no, we're not talking properly to each other, because the feedback loops are there, but there's still bullshit coming out of it. And it's always misaligned content-wise. So let's fix that. Collaborative modeling and so on. And then realizing we're doing everything right by the book, as I understand domain-driven design. We even got the experts, like I talked to Alberto and Eric, and like name drop. We talked to like all the book authors, say, hey, this is what we tried. What could we do better? And then it's like, after you try every method, realizing it's still failing, like this can't be a problem of sticky notes or methods. And at some point, Roman Sachse, a colleague in my office, introduced me to spiral dynamics, the psychosocial evolution of human behavior. And I usually don't drop this name. You have to be very careful, because there is an esoterical movement with the same name and very similar content. So Googling this stuff is kind of like gets you into icky spaces. But it is a psychosocial theory of how people evolve as individuals and also as groups. And I don't want to go into a theory talk here now, but just the basic idea of like there are different memes you gather during your lifetime based on the complexity of the problematic situations you're in. So you try to survive, right? And then there's family grouping, and then there's like power struggles in your youth and whatnot. Then you get into a conservative mindset. Then there's like the aspirational driving mindset, like scientific thinking and company struggles. Then there's green mindset and so on and so forth. There's a whole bunch of theory behind why and how this works in psychology. But these patterns, they mapped really well on what I was observing in the company. So I was like, holy shit, this is a blueprint. And fully aware of, yes, we're all humans, we're all biased. And whenever the shoe fits, it's probably not your shoe, but let's still look at it from all angles. But the more we try to prod it and say, okay, this has to be wrong, right? Good scientific thinking, like what's the null hypothesis? How can we prove this to be false? Every time we try, it's like, oh, this fits so well. And then realizing, no matter what method we're using, when we talk to these people, they react exactly as you would expect someone with this mindset, with the conservative mindset, to react to these things. And then realizing, okay, so I never understood why asking for feedback, making things very transparent. I hear back echo. Well, making things very transparent leads to people feeling attacked or getting like humorous or defensive or whatever. Like, why? And this is what you expect from a very conservative person if you let them figure out what can you do better, because you attack their identity. It's like, okay, this fits too well. And then we use the methods from that basically emerge from spiral dynamics to say, how can we manage this? And that management actually led to some ease in the system. It made things work better, because you take people from where they are and don't try to bring them to where you are, but only figure out where could they go from where they are, right? Help them do the next step, even though it's not what you want, but it's the only thing they can do. And that changed things for the better. So this was our like long-term experimental, first of all, biased understanding, but then figuring out what actually works and doesn't work. And that's when the realization came, like, we have a cultural problem here. There are different mindsets, different emotional backgrounds, different wants and needs, and people are not always able and aware at the same level to communicate about their feelings and their inner world. Not everybody is self-reflected and does feedback loops on themselves and so on. Like, this is rare. It's not the norm. And sometimes we in the agile space and modeling space forget that not everybody stands at home with sticky notes and figures out their own life, right? Many people just live their life and are happy the way it is, and they don't want to need to change.
Yeah, and that has to do, of course, with what's happening at home. How much load do they have? There's many reasons. Your event storming reminds me a bit of Paul Rayner's story about popping open some code and go refactoring in public, right? So your refactors work.
Yeah, let me guess. Somebody got hurt because they changed their code and made it better. And that person is like, I worked hard on this code. You're like, yeah.
And it's the same actually what people might underestimate with event storming, right? Event storming is not just a method, I guess, what you do. You put people in a room and you might accidentally, unintentionally attack their models.
Yeah.
And if you're not careful with that, their thoughts and when people don't feel safe, I guess it's very hard for them to change.
Yeah.
So
I want to add to that.
Yeah, sure. And my question, so add something, and my question would be, Is there something you would have done different looking back?
Yes. So first I want to interject and say, it's not just if they feel safe, they need to feel safe and intrinsically motivated.
Yeah.
That is one very important step. No matter the level of safety, if you don't have a need to change, you will not change. So the thing that I would have done differently looking back, the very obvious thing is leave way earlier. Because I realized I was a very dangerous force in that group. Like I was trying to invoke change that wasn't demanded. This is something I do differently with all my customers ever since. It's like I get a mandate, like not just from the company. Like if a boss pays me and there's a one protege in the company saying, hey, one sponsor saying, we want you and this is what we're going to do. I want to talk to the people I work with before we start the workshop, right? Because otherwise you're helping people against their will. And that always fails. That is just a massive struggle I don't want to do. So if you don't want the help or the change, I don't want to help you, not in a mean way, but I don't want to hurt you with this, right? So that's the one thing I would have changed. Try to get a mandate and realizing there is none, and then just leaving the company because they were doing the things they were doing. The system was optimizing itself to be kept alive. And that's the defeatist way of thinking, right? I mean, it's a helpful way, but it's also saying, yeah, I struggled a long time. I should have quit earlier. Let's put that aside. That is a thing I should have done. But if I wouldn't have quit, the thing I would do differently in that company is to not try to enforce my culture, the culture of agile feedback loops and collaborative modeling and constant visualization and focus on clean language and all that stuff and psychological safety to make that the leading culture of the company. Accept the culture that is, right? If people are conservative or power-driven, or these are not just placative stereotypes, but it can be a very complex roster of various emotions and needs. That's what is. Respect what is there and figure out what help do they really need? What's the next bottleneck? How can you help this system grow into its better potential, not into the vision that somebody sees as a target? Like you can have a vision where the whole company could be, in 5 years, we're all like super emotionally sharing and have fast feedback loops and we release twice a day. Great. But that's not real, right? That's a fantasy. If you have a company that has half-year cycles and the company is like teams with clear boundaries and clear bosses and whatnot, this transformation is a 100% shift of culture. There is no way you get there. You can only figure out what's the next helpful step and then also be agile about that. So the agility, the responding to change and going in iterations on the cultural change is something I didn't do. And that is something I would do very, very differently nowadays. And that can very well mean living with a part of the culture that I don't like and where I think this is hurtful for the system in the way I would like the system to be, but it's actually the best thing the system has right now and the best thing it works for the system. So the result I produce don't have to be in a way that I like. Like my aesthetic realization of I like this shape, this is beautiful, let's go there, is not what needs to be there. So this is a hard thing as a facilitator or as a consultant. I come with my own biases of how things should be, right? What would be a good or right solution? And I have my experiences from 200 plus companies and like, yeah, I feel entitled to know things. But there are 200 other people in that company that also know things and they want different things. So
yeah, I think what you're saying, you say, work with what there is. And also, right, think about yourself. If I ask someone, you should go to therapy and you're like, no, well, then it's never going to work.
Yeah.
Even though everyone can use therapy, but
Yeah,
you know, I'm not in a situation where I think I did it in the past, but right now, no, so it won't work. I need to be open for it.
Yeah.
I think Andrew, you have,
I was just going to ask Mark, do you like, cause you mentioned like paying attention to kind of stuff. So you know when you could push or when you couldn't push or when you need to just kind of live with things. Are there any heuristics or smells that you've learned over the time where you're like, you can obviously find these things by pushing too hard and then you get pushback and then it hurts and it's painful. But have you kind of developed any heuristics for kind of spotting this stuff without having to go through the pain cycle of?
So I think like 10 years ago or so, I started a list of heuristics, of modeling heuristics and cultural change heuristics and architecture. Like for all the different areas in my life, I started to build heuristical lists. And then I realized with my like ADHD brain, like I realized I built lists, but I never look at the lists. So I stopped actually collecting. It's the thing I do the most is gut feeling. And that's a very bad heuristic. I totally realize that, but it's informed gut feeling. So I feel entitled to it being a better solution. No, but there are some mechanics that I often go to. Like I try to keep my heuristic list to a very simple, manageable thing that I actually operate with. So that's one heuristic. Keep your heuristic list short and don't try to have like 500 options. Like you're not an LLM with a bunch of skills that you can execute whenever the prompt fits, right? So what I do is I often open with an event storming, right? This is my starting here. Like take the modeling method I'm most familiar with that has the highest potential for people to interact in various ways, unconstrained, and keep a strong eye on the people that do not interact. So there are introverts that don't want to open up in front of a group that much, or that takes more energy. There's political struggles and so on. So observing human behavior, observing body language, observing the interaction, and very important heuristic, observe the non-interaction. As a facilitator, I try to keep an eye on who's not interacting, even though they should be from a point of domain or a power level. And then interacting in shorter cycles, saying like, hey, we make the big session to understand things. So don't try to fix everything in the same modeling session. It's also a heuristic. If you see a problem, you don't have to address it immediately. Just write it down and then talk to the people, right? If you have a good standing with them, if you know, Andrew, you and I, if I have a problem with you, I think, oh, that's weird. I know I can just come to you like, hey, can we talk a second? If there's somebody in a suit saying, no, this is how we should do things. Like, I'm like, yeah, I'm not just going to go to their office and say, look, I observed a problem with you. Like that's no. But then you have like a beer in the afternoon or go to a football match or just share a lunch break and get into the conversation. So take your time to really understand where the struggle comes from. And then for the next session, you can then prepare and adjust. So those are a bunch of the heuristics. Small control experiments is something I love to do. And that kind of fits with Andreas' bite-sized architecture and also these bite-sized sessions here, right? Small control experiments is what I really love to do. So because I'm fully aware I'm biased. Like I can be the smartest person in the room and I still get it wrong most of the time. You're biased and you will never lose your biases, not fully. So given that, just assume you don't know shit. So here's an experiment. What if I try this? Let's observe what the result is. Working with null hypotheses, figuring out what would be how can we break this, right? And just figure out what happens when you try something. And then in that case, just be creative. Like this is where the DDD community helps. There is dddheuristics.com. That's something I sometimes go through to just randomly pick something, say, let's try that. And you just try and figure out what happens.
Yeah. I think that you mentioned it a few times, but time to think as well, right? So I think neurodiversity, whether or not we're neurodiverse or not, I think people like some of us tend to just think and process stuff really fast. And a lot of other people just don't, right? Especially if they don't move between companies. Because I think I realized recently the fact I'm a consultant is possibly because I get bored quite a lot. And then I get moved from company to company, whether I like it or not. Other people somewhere for a long time because they don't want to move and they like to understand stuff and they want to think about it longer. So like you said about time to think, I think can be a big deal, right? Just if you rush people into stuff, even if they like the sound of it, they might be like, I don't want to go into this too fast. So
that was my biggest personal learning. So sorry, Kenny. Just finished. This was my biggest personal learning. It's not something I want to give other people, but for me, this was super helpful. Shut the fuck up. Here's what I learned for me, because I'm someone, I think while I talk. So if I sit alone in my office and you want deep thinking from me, forget it. Like I can do this for half an hour max and then I'm gone. I need someone to talk to. And while we're talking, like the whole story I'm telling today, I didn't prepare any of this. Like this is not like I don't have my bullet points in front of me. I think while I talk and this works wonderfully. So I can come up with great new ideas in a group of people. The more people, the more energy. And that's great. And then I realized not everybody is that way. Some people just need silence and give me time to think. So I was like, hey, what do you think? And they're like, I don't know. And then while they were not saying anything, I'm like, okay, jumping right in again. So for me, this is years ago already, but this was the biggest learning to say, give people space. And I just realized, Kenny, I just shut you up to not give you space, but give people space. And just, even though everything in me is screaming like, yeah, talk, you have an idea, go further. Like, no, just wait and open the space, hold the space for other people to find the time and power to think. That's super important.
So especially, big picture events are great, but they're a full day. So having shorter experiences, what you're saying, Marco, is really nice. And my main heuristic now is I don't tend to make decisions in meetings. I say, okay, let's write it down in an ADR. Then I'm going to share it with you and you can think about it. You can get your feedback and maybe in a couple of days, I put you all together if there's no icky stuff happening while we're asynchronously talking. So I give people space and time. So I guess I'm similar as you, Marco. Luckily, I have a brilliant wife who told me to shut up once in a while. So
Is there a correlation between consultants that are community members and ADHD or so? We should gather
Not
data
sure. I
there.
think it could be quite low.
ADHD, I tend to talk a lot. It's an emotional thing. Anyway,
Yeah.
not for this session.
Yeah.
I think that's it. Thank you, Marco. Or do you, Andre or Andrew, have one last tiring question you want
I'm good.
to
I'm
ask?
just thinking about a load of stuff now. That all the stuff that Marcus didn't mention to us. So good.
Thank you so much.
I think this was great. Thank you very much, Marco.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. And I don't generally like to say this, but please like us, subscribe, so it spread the word of these stories. I hope they're very helpful. Come to our Discord channel. Marco's there, Andrea's there, Andrew's there, I'm there, and we can talk more about these subjects. And maybe you'll be in our next stories of facilitating, design, architecting, whatever the show is called nowadays. Thanks, and see you next time. Bye-bye.